Hello, everybody. This is Daniel Heru, the Comedic Atheist, coming to you live from EDPN Entertainment Debate Programming Network. And man, some interesting things happened today. Chris Harris, once again, did it again, got two juggernauts in the ring. I didn't think that I would see this for a while because I thought that Khonshu was retired. So it was very interesting seeing him in Lex Vortex, the double master teacher. These are two old heads going at it. Both got great knowledge. Peace to both of those brothers. Big ups to both of them. And I'm going to be going over the discussions that they had tomorrow, and maybe they'll fine tune the debate. We'll figure out what's going on with them on that. And yeah, big ups to Chris Harris, MVP. The undefeated, the old time, 5 time, you know, champion, undefeated over at the House of Consciousness, all the way to SBDL and other platforms. So big up to Chris. But right now, what we're going to talk about is we're going to talk about a question that's been going on in the community. A question that's been going on in the community for a while. And just in other platforms, they've been talking, you know, about Ma'at and Torah and how these things play out in the ancient world. And if Ma'at or Kemet even had, like, if Ma'at had rules. And we can clearly see that Ma'at had a moral compass, a moral foundation for their kingdoms and their rulership, where people like your Christian, your black Hebrews, and I won't call any names, I just want to stick with the information, will say, you can't say that because Ma'at didn't have, it's not laws. The 42 confessions, isn't law. So what we want to do is, kind of go over those, assertions and see how they hold up. So first of all, we're going to say, for people who do not know, Ma'at is an ancient Egyptian deity, the personification of truth, justice, freedom, reciprocity, and in the cosmic order. Ma'at is the daughter of the sun Ra, and she was associated with Thoth, god of wisdom. Now, when we start talking about Ma'at, as you can see, I have the judgment scene up here, and Ma'at is the scales. And you can see the feather on one side, and you can also see the heart on the other, right? And so your heart had to be lighter than a feather. So when we start talking about Ma'at, we look at this judgment scene, and we look at Thoth on the right, as Thoth is writing down, recording what's going on. And then on top, you have 12 judges. And so I don't know if I may be, maybe I'm misinterpreting, but when you have the whole judicial system, you have 12 judges, you have a scale that weighs, right from wrong, good versus bad, and you have a recorder. That is a court scene. That's law, or that's a basis for judgment, and there has to be some type of standard or accordance of a way of life, or a law, or a rule, or something, in order for this scene to take place. Now, we start talking about the Torah or the Bible and how they got their law, and we know that we have the 12 commandments, but there are other laws in the Bible. But the reason why a lot, when people start talking about law, we have to understand that laws are, it's a system, and this is just from Wikipedia. This is just simple stuff you can do yourself, right? And so a law is a system of rules created and enforced through social or governmental institutions to regulate behavior with the precise definitions of matters. So law is for the lawlessness. Once again, law is for the lawlessness. These are for people and behaviors that are going against universal principles and laws. There are things that's going on between people, and it happens enough where somebody has to step in and they have to create a law for it. They have to create a law that says you can't do that. Now, they say that there was no law, there wasn't anything in Kemet at the time, but if we just go with biblical literature, we can easily dispel that assertion because we find that, in Exodus 2:11 through 22, Moses flees Egypt because he kills an Egyptian. Not only does Moses kill an Egyptian, he knows it's wrong and he knows there's a law because he looked this way and that way. And then after he looked this way and that way, when no one was looking, he snuck up on the brother and he killed him. And after he killed him, they said that he covered him or buried him in sand. So he tried to conceal his crime. He knew that he had did wrong. He knew that he had broke a law in Egypt, according to biblical literature, because Moses never existed. But we just want to go with the story. So he knew this. And, when he knew this, he hit the body and then he came out as if like nothing happened. Nothing happened. And, he must not have been a good crook or a criminal because after he killed him, I guess the next day or so, he goes up to two other Hebrews that's supposed to be fighting and he asked them, why are you fighting my brother? And the other Hebrews like, who are you to be a judge over us? Are you going to kill me like you killed that Egyptian? And then Moses like, oh, hell. Is this known? Do they know about this? So he feared that there would be some type of repercussions for what he did. And so he fled. He says, this must, people must know this. Pharaoh must have heard of this. And so when the Pharaoh heard of it, the Pharaoh said, the Pharaoh was going to kill him because he had killed an Egyptian. Apparently the punishment was death. And it must have been something that they upheld because you have to understand that according to the biblical literature, Moses was a priest. Moses was the brother to the Pharaoh. So for the Pharaoh to have, want to kill Moses or place judgment to condemn Moses to death, it had to be something strong for that to happen because the Pharaoh could have easily just said, well, you know what? That's my brother. He's a higher rank than the soldier that he killed. Whatever reason he gave was good enough. So, it is what it is. I'm Pharaoh. That's law. That's rule. But that did not happen. The Pharaoh was keeping the law and Moses knew it. So, there was laws. Then after Moses, according to the biblical literature, Moses goes out in the wilderness and then Moses, they're free, whatever. Moses, then he's sitting in front of the people in the morning and placing judgment. And his father-in-law comes to him and he sees this and asks Moses what he's doing. Moses tells, and I'm paraphrasing, right? And Moses telling him that, hey, I'm hearing these people out. I'm trying to place judgment against his and hers or his and his. And, and the people, it's what I have to do after they came out of the land of Egypt. Well, apparently, coming out of the land of Egypt, the Lord delivering them wasn't good enough because it was so many that it took all day, all night for Moses to place judgment where his father-in-law told him, hey, you know what? It's too much. You need judges to help you, facilitate judgment over these people, because there's just too many problems going on. So it shows you that the laws that they had, even back in Moses' time, after even coming out of Egypt, according to the biblical literature, these were still some unruly people. Laws, they needed the laws. They needed laws for everything because laws were made by, they say it's passed by God, but passed on by Moses. And it was something that they themselves didn't discover. It was something that they themselves didn't find that was worthy. The treatment of the brother. It was something that somebody else had to tell them as a people. And they just rebelled. They revolted against this law. Now, when we start talking about Ma'at, and we start talking about the 42 negative confessions, or the 42 confessions of innocence, or the affirmations, whatever you like want to call it. These principles, these laws, were um, based off of principles, and it tells you um, that this is kind of an abstract for Ma'at, because these people base these things um, off of, experiences that they had in of universal law. And this is just Britannica that I'm going to read some stuff to you. And it talks about, it says, in the ceremony of the dead, which is what we're looking at right here, named for a Set, they call Osiris, which is Greek, the god of the dead, was believed to focus upon the weighing of the heart of the deceased in the scale balance of Ma'at. You can see on her hieroglyph the ostrich feather as a test of conformity to proper values. Right? So it's talking about the values of life. And they say, oh, this is a scene of, no, this is for the living. The negative confessions of innocence, or the 42 affirmations, are guiding principles of moral living. Now, it says, in the abstract sense, Ma'at was a divine order established at creation and reaffirmed at the ascension of each king of Egypt. So when one of the brothers was saying, in a debate that Chris had, it was Brother Judah, and he says, well, you know what? How can you keep Ma'at? You don't have a Pharaoh. You don't have a Pharaoh. You can't keep Ma'at. Well, the Pharaoh is a representation of the one in the uphold of Ma'at. He reaffirms it with the people. He helps maintain it. It's not like you need him. He is the person that is supposed to look out for the people, to make sure that as an example, a living example of God, and he's supposed to upkeep it. It says, in the setting of Ma'at, order in the place of itself is disorder. It's Isfat, as Chris Harris was saying. So if you keep order, you have Ma'at. And if you have disorder, you have Isfat. The king played a role of the sun god, which is what Brother Judas was trying to say. With the close link to Ma'at, meaning he had kept it, he maintained it. Ma'at stood at the head of the sun god's bark as it traveled through the sky and the underworld. Right? It says, although aspects of the kingship and Ma'at were at some times subject to criticism and reaffirmations, the principles of Ma'at and the kingship underlining these two institutions were fundamental to ancient Egyptian life and thought and endured to the end of the ancient Egyptian history. So these two principles of Ma'at was the fundamentals of the life, the living, as they lived. So when we start talking about, when he says the personification, because people always talk about they thought they were real and so forth and so on. And this all has to do with Ma'at and the weighing of the scales. So personifications, once again, this is just a dictionary version, a dictionary definition on the internet. It says the attributions of a personal nature or human characteristics to something non-human, or the representation of an abstract quality in a human form. A figure intended to represent an abstract quality. A person, animal, or object regarded as representing or embodying a quality, concept, or thing. So when we start looking at Anu and Baset and Ma'at and and Thoth, these right here, they have qualities and concepts that represent something. They're not saying that they're real, because they're human attributes on a non-human thing. That's why it's non-living. So like, Horu, the hawk head with the human body, Thoth, these aren't real. They represent aspects and qualities of certain things. And so These aspects and qualities, these principles were personified, and this is how you get the creation, and this is how you start getting ma'at. And then the principles, noun, is of a principle of idea. So the principles became the philosophy of their interactions with nature and the cosmos, and how they started to understand everything, and how they put stuff together, and then the experience with each other as well as with nature form certain principles. And the ideas and the principles is a basic idea or rule that explains or controls how something happens or works. So this is how we start creating the ma'at and these principles and these philosophies. And these are coming from the Cambridge Dictionary. And then we have the principle of a noun, a moral rule or standard of good behavior. So as I said before, the negative confessions of innocence are guiding principles of moral living. This is what these confessions or these omissions or these affirmations, this is what it represents. Then we have the moral rule of a principle, a moral rule or standard of good behavior or fair dealing. This is how they were able to interact with each other. So, based on their philosophy and they creating principles, they had an idea and they had basic behavior of how to deal with people in nature, that it became a way of life for them. And then through these principles, the omissions, these philosophies gave a basic truth. And that principles as of a basic truth is a basic truth that explains or controls how something happens or works. So they had an intricate philosophy of how to live with each other and in harmony with the universe, earth, and a fellow man, and with nature. And so these principles were how they lived. And so when we start looking at principles as a portion of value that guides behavior or evaluation, and these principles are like law. There's no way you can get a judgment scene if you don't have law. But the difference between the law in the Bible and the law of Ma'at is that these were principles that they found within themselves on how to deal with each other, how to study, understand the cosmos, how to understand science or language, how to do these how to have moral behavior, proper behavior with each other. And so when you start looking at Ma'at, Ma'at created this, this philosophy. And philosophy is the love for wisdom, because in Egypt, in Kemet, men went to school for like 40 plus years to become, a priest. And they had multiple schools of study and arts of study. And from these studies, they created these principles in which they to live by. And then that from the royal family, the sultan or the pharaoh, the king, however you want to call it, these things were reinforced or reaffirmed into the people who look for their guidance. And with humans being humans, if the pharaoh upkept it, he was in ma'at, he was in order. If he did not, he was in isfet, and he was in disorder. And there were consequences, and they believed that their philosophy that they understood is that they could possibly pay for it, or they would pay for it in another life. But I want to understand something. When we start talking about philosophy and the definition, philosophy is a study in general and fundamental questions such as those about existence, reason, knowledge, value, mind, and language. Such questions are often posed as problems to be studied or resolved. Now, this is what happened when you have a people, and we're talking about not just from Egypt, we're talking about Nile Valley and how it came up. And, they had these, they had these fundamental questions about the world that they lived in, and their interactions and how it affected them. And they created all these schools of thought and so forth that led to the world. And these laws, they became principle, compared to law. Law and principles are the same. It just depends upon how you get them. Because the law is pretty much given, given to an individual by a governing body. That's how it's given it to you. Where if you have a principle, you can, it typically is a kind of an ingrown thing, and it develops culture and so forth. But when we start talking about the rules or the laws, it says, I have not coveted my neighbor's wife, I have not stolen, I have not killed. These are things, that you're confessing that, what you, pretty much, or you shall not, compared to I have not. And then the negative confessions, it says, I have not done wrong, I have not robbed, I have not stolen, I have not slain people, I have not destroyed the food offering, I have not reduced measure, I have not stolen the God's property, I have not told lies. It continues to go on and on, on, it says, I was not stolen, I have not fornicated with a fornicator, I have not caused anyone to weep, I have not dismembered. These are someone affirming the quality and the morality of his life living, because this is what apparently in the judgment scene, that's what it's saying. So ma'at, your principles for a kingdom who thrived for thousands of years before the interruptions of the Europeans and other invaders from the East, flourished with these principles, created a civilization that's still can't be figured out today with the things they did, compared to a book and a law that's about 2,000 years if you want to hold a record. We can go 3,000 years if you want to go with that record. And people been in curses, for I don't know, 2,000 years since the Bible has been created. People are still in curse. They're still cursed. I don't know how that is. So when people tell me that, hey, Ma'at doesn't have law, or Ma'at, doesn't have a moral standard, it shows you that they don't understand the culture of Ma'at and how Ma'at had these principles. Ma'at had these principles. And these principles judged their life and how they treated each other, and how they treated, how they was interacted with nature, and how they understood the cosmos, and their curiosity of the divine and what was righteous and in order. So, once again, if anybody has, would like to talk about, or respond that, principle versus law, we can talk about that. Principle versus law. Because we know that Moses studied, and according to literature, studying all the ways of the Egyptians, and he was a priest. So his his first encounter with his morality came from the Egyptians. It came from principles, and it came from schools of study and thought. And it wasn't until Moses became a Hebrew is when he committed his first sin. Now we can consider that coincidence, or we can chalk it up. But according to your literature, that's a fact. So this is your brother Daniel Heru, the comedic atheist, coming to you live from EDPN, Entertainment Debate Networking Program. And hey, y'all hit the like button, subscribe to the channel. I'm going to have some interesting things coming out. Just working this thing, man. This OBS is a trip, but I'm getting there. And I hope to see some of y'all and hear more from you guys. And yeah, let's get it on. Y'all take care of each other, and y'all be safe out there. Hatepu.